February 1919. Budapest. The government of Hungary is falling apart. The war is lost. The Allies are carving up the country. The army is gone. The streets are full of workers who want someone to blame and something to believe in. And the most powerful man in Hungary is sitting in a prison cell. His name is Bela Kun. He has been locked up for weeks. The government put him here. And now that same government is sending its ministers to negotiate with him. He is the prisoner. He will dictate the terms. He was born Bela Kun on February 20th, 1886, in the village of Lele in Transylvania, a region of the Austro-Hungarian Empire that is now part of Romania. His father was a village notary, Jewish by birth, secular by practice. The family had assimilated as thoroughly as the empire required, which was to say, completely and always, provisionally. In 1906, Bela changed his surname from Kun to Kun. The empire wanted Hungarians. He would be Hungarian. He studied law and then abandoned it for journalism, became an organizer for the workers' movement in Transylvania, was sentenced to 6 months in prison in 1907 for writing a leaflet in support of a strike. He had a fiery reputation. He was known for duels as well as politics. He was, by most accounts, difficult to be around and impossible to ignore. The following year, Austria-Hungary went to war, and they drafted him. He fought on the Russian front with the 21st Infantry Regiment of Kolozsvár. In the summer of 1916, somewhere along the Russian lines, he was captured. The Imperial Russian Army sent him to a prisoner of war camp in Tomsk, in western Siberia. He arrived as a social democrat. A year later, the Bolsheviks seized power in Petrograd, and the world Bela Kun had been born into ceased to exist. The revolution reached Tomsk in December 1917. Bela Kun walked out of the prisoner of war camp a convert. He went to Petrograd, then to Moscow. In March 1918, he founded the Hungarian group of the Russian Communist Party, an organization of former Hungarian prisoners of war who had embraced Bolshevism. He recruited them himself through the force of his speaking. Lenin noticed. But Kun was not Lenin's man. Inside the party, he had already gravitated toward the ultra-radical faction, men who believed in revolutionary offensive at any cost, who thought Lenin was too cautious, too pragmatic. Lenin called them Kunerists. It was not a compliment. More specifically, Kun had aligned himself with Grigory Zinoviev, the head of the Comintern, one of the most powerful figures in the early Soviet leadership. Zinoviev and Kun shared the same instinct: push harder, move faster, trust the revolution to carry everything. It was a bond that would serve Kun well for years, and one that would eventually help kill him. Lenin used him anyway. A man willing to export revolution to Hungary was too valuable to leave idle. Lenin gave him money, instructions, and a mission. In November 1918, the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed. The war was over. Bela Kun crossed back into Hungary with several hundred Hungarian communists and a large sum of Soviet money. His orders were to build a revolutionary party and take power. He arrived in Budapest on November 16th. 8 days later, he had founded the Communist Party of Hungary. Within 3 months, he had built a membership of 30,000 to 40,000 people. He was not doing this alone. From Moscow, Lenin watched every move by radio telegraph. On March 23, 1919, 2 days after Kun took power, Lenin sent him a direct order. The Social Democrats must be purged from the government. Hungary must become a genuine dictatorship of the proletariat. Kun obeyed. He obeyed every order from Moscow throughout the entire life of his government. He was not a leader operating independently. He was a transmission point, the voice of Moscow, speaking Hungarian. On March 21, 1919, Hungary became the second communist state in Europe. How it happened was extraordinary. Bela Kun was in prison at the time, arrested weeks earlier after a demonstration ended in a shootout. The government's mistake was allowing him to receive visitors. On some days, 400 people came to his cell. He directed the Communist Party from behind bars and became a martyr in the process. When the moderate government collapsed under the weight of the Allies' territorial demands, the Social Democrats, desperate for any Soviet help against the Romanian army, came to negotiate with the prisoner. Kun dictated the terms. He was released from prison and sworn into office the same day his government was proclaimed. The Republic lasted 133 days. Kun nationalized everything: banks, factories, estates. He refused to redistribute land to the peasants, in defiance of basic political reality, and instead collectivized it, keeping the old landlords on as managers of the new state farms. The peasantry, which had expected land, received nothing and turned against him. He unleashed special units, known as the Lenin Boys, to suppress counter-revolution in the countryside. They operated without courts, without restraint, and without mercy. The Soviet Red Army, which Kun had promised would come, never came. It was fighting its own civil war. Hungary was alone. Romania invaded. The Hungarian Red Army fought and lost. On August 1, 1919, Bela Kun and his colleagues fled to Vienna, taking art treasures and the gold reserves of the National Bank with them. The Republic had lasted 4 months and 13 days. What followed it, the White Terror unleashed against Hungarian Jews and communists, killed thousands and lasted years. In the summer of 1920, after nearly a year interned in Austria, Bela Kun arrived in Soviet Russia. Stalin was not yet the supreme leader. Lenin was still in power. But the system Kun was entering, the system that would become Stalin's, was already taking its shape. Kun was given command of the Crimean Revolutionary Committee. The White Army under General Wrangel had just been defeated. The Crimea was pacified. The civil war in the south was over. The white soldiers had surrendered under a promise of amnesty. The promise was a lie. Kun and his co-commander, Rosalia Zemliachka, signed the order to execute the prisoners. Lenin approved it. What followed was one of the largest massacres of the Civil War. Tens of thousands of people who had laid down their arms were killed. The exact number is disputed and will likely never be fully known. The scale was not. Victor Serge, Bolshevik, eyewitness, later one of the revolution's most honest critics, condemned Kun directly for what he called treachery toward the surrendered whites. For the next 15 years, Bela Kun was one of Moscow's most active operatives in Europe. In March 1921, he was sent to Germany to advise the Communist Party on revolutionary strategy. He pushed them into what became known as the March Action, an aggressive offensive designed to seize power. It failed catastrophically. Lenin was furious. In a closed Comintern session, he used the French word for it, les bêtises de Bela Kun, the stupidities of Bela Kun. He said publicly that the thesis behind the March action was politically entirely false. Kun survived. He was too useful to discard. Through the 1920s, he moved across Europe, Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, conducting undercover work for Moscow. In 1928, he was arrested in Vienna by Austrian police for traveling on a forged passport. But the deeper problem was not the passport. It was Stalin. By the late 1920s, Stalin had destroyed Trotsky and was finishing off Zinoviev. Kun had been Zinoviev's man in the Comintern for years, part of his faction, aligned with his politics, built by his patronage. When Stalin came for Zinoviev, every man connected to him became a question mark. Kun understood what that meant, and he did what the system rewarded. Back in Moscow, Kun began reporting fellow Hungarian communist émigrés to the OGPU, Stalin's secret police, men whose removal served Stalin's consolidation of the Comintern. He was not settling personal scores. He was paying dues, proving that his loyalty now ran to Stalin and no one else. Several of the men he named were arrested. Some did not survive. He became a fanatical Stalinist, not reluctantly, not as a calculation, but with what appeared to be genuine conviction. He wrote that the strength of Soviet power lay first of all in the close organization of the party and its iron discipline. He believed it. That was the tragedy of it. He believed every word. He spent the early 1930s supporting Stalin's social fascism line. He had personal reasons. The Hungarian Social Democrats had, in his view, betrayed him in 1919. He could not forgive them, and so he served Stalin's line with the extra fury of a man whose ideology and his grievances happened to align. For a time, it worked. He remained a prominent Comintern figure. He was still useful. In 1935, Stalin changed course. The new line was the Popular Front, communists allying with the very Social Democrats that Kun had spent years attacking. Stalin had decided it. The Comintern would implement it. Kun was assigned to prepare the agenda for the 7th Comintern Congress, at which this change would be announced. Instead, he tried to sabotage it. This was not a policy disagreement. Stalin had given a direct instruction. Kun had defied it openly, the one thing in 20 years of service that Stalin would not absorb. He was formally sanctioned for insubordination. He was dropped from the Comintern Presidium in July 1935. He tried to appeal directly to Stalin. Stalin refused to see him. That refusal was the verdict. Everything that followed was paperwork. By September 1936, Zinoviev, Kun's old Comintern patron, had already been shot. On September 5th of that year, Bela Kun was summoned before the full presidium of the Comintern. Dimitrov was there. Peek, Gottwald, Togliatti, Kuzinin. The most senior figures in international communism assembled in a room in Moscow. The accusation was delivered by Dmitry Manuilsky, Kun's enemy within the Comintern, the man Kun had himself previously denounced to the NKVD as a Trotskyite. Manuilsky had also reported Kun to the NKVD as a Trotskyite. Both accusations had gone to the same desk. Both men were in this room. Only one of them would leave Moscow alive. Kun defended himself. He said that in his circular letter, he had not meant to criticize Stalin. He considered Stalin, he told the room, one of the best existing communists. Nobody spoke in his defense. Dimitrov closed the session and referred the matter to a special commission. Kun was never examined by the commission. According to the Finnish communist Arvo Tuominen, who was present and recorded what he saw, Kun walked out of the meeting and was taken by 3 members of the security services. That was September 1936. Stalin had everything he needed. A man who had been Zinoviev's ally, a man who had defied a direct instruction, a man with his own history, his own reputation, his own claim on the revolution that predated Stalin's control of it. The formal arrest came on June 28, 1937. He was beaten at the point of arrest. The charges: leader of a counter-revolutionary terrorist organization, spy for Admiral Horthy's Hungary. The man who had helped build the Hungarian Soviet Republic, who had fled Hungary 20 years before because Horthy's forces were trying to kill him, was charged with working for Horthy. He was tortured. Accounts describe him being forced to stand for 10 to 20 hours at a stretch until he fainted. When they brought him back to his cell, his legs were so swollen he could not stand. He resisted for a long time. In the end, he confessed. He was tried before a judicial troika. 3 men, no defense, no appeal. Found guilty, sentenced to death. The sentence was carried out the same day, August 29, 1938, at the Comintern shooting ground outside Moscow. 10 of the 16 members of the First Central Committee of the Hungarian Communist Party were killed by Stalin. 11 of the 20 People's Commissars of the Hungarian Soviet Republic of 1919 were executed. The organization that had built the only communist state in Central Europe before the Second World War was almost entirely consumed. When Bela Kun was posthumously rehabilitated in 1956, the Soviet Communist Party told its Hungarian counterpart that he had died in prison on November 30th, 1939. The date was a lie. He had been shot in August 1938, more than a year earlier. In 1989, 33 years after the false rehabilitation, the Soviet government finally acknowledged the truth. Moscow gave him his revolution. Moscow gave him his orders. Moscow gave him the money to return to Hungary, the radio telegraph instructions that guided his government, the ideology that told him violence was not a crime but a tool of liberation. He used it in Hungary. He used it in Crimea. He spent 20 years doing the work the system required. And the system, when it had finished with him, did what systems do when they have finished with the people who built them. It erased him, shot him, lied about when. Then, 30 years later, it named a street after him.